Hamas released a video Wednesday of 23-year-old hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland, an American-Israeli dual citizen who survived the October 7th Hamas attack on the Supernova Music Festival and was taken captive. In the updated video, Hirsch, whose left arm was mutilated in the attack, told his parents he loves them. The disturbing video showing proof of life is a direct response to pressure the Qatari government is putting on Hamas to show evidence that these hostages are in fact still alive.
According to Axios, the Biden administration has insisted that the Qatari government assist in getting proof of life for Goldberg, Poland, and the other 5 American hostages believed to be alive in captivity. The proof of life comes as the Qatari government signaled it would be reevaluating its role as mediator in ceasefire talks following scrutiny from members of Congress for it to be more involved. All eyes will now be on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to see if he'll agree to Hamas's demands for a hostage deal. Per reports, Israel's war cabinet is set to meet Thursday to discuss advancing hostage negotiations. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan planned a trip to Saudi Arabia that was postponed amid the Biden administration's effort to normalize relations between the Arab nation and Israel. Scoring his foreign relations win would be monumental for Biden ahead of the November election.
It's important to remember there's still Americans being held prisoner by Hamas this many months after October 7th. We don't know how many of them are still alive. We now have some evidence that this person was alive at least as recently as whenever the date is believed to have been. Obviously injured, missing part of his arm, and so on. So the American aspect of this has not been resolved whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously non-American hostages too, of course. This has been extremely frustrating to the families of hostage members, and we've seen this from the protests that have been happening inside of Israel. There's a real sense that the hostages, frankly, are not being prioritized. They've become not secondary, not tertiary, but so far down the list of kind of central talking points or anger tension points in at least the American discourse. And perhaps it's easier for Americans to forget about the centrality of hostages than people in Israel. But certainly there's a great deal of pushback about whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu's approach to dealing with Gaza is in conflict with actually getting the return of hostages. Whether or not a complete siege, a desire to do a ground invasion of Rafah, an unwillingness to come to a ceasefire is ultimately being paid for at the cost of all of these hostages who have now been in there in custody for 6 months, going on 7 months, and who are experiencing all of the same lack of access to food, clean water, medical attention that Gazans themselves are experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, it's very evidently and obviously in tension. That's part of the reason Hamas takes the hostages, is to, in theory, deter any kind of retaliation from Israel. Now, Israel under Netanyahu has gone full steam ahead with a total war on Gaza, despite the hostages being held, and has signaled that just the release of the hostages from the Israeli government's point of view is not enough. They are committed to the defeat or surrender of at least the top Hamas leadership, death or defeat for them. So just making a hostage deal is not enough. So that's, in terms of the Israeli priorities, so that's where we are. If American priorities are something different, if we value getting those hostages back, even without the total defeat of Hamas, then Biden would need to say something about that to Netanyahu and threaten to withdraw funding if that was not met. Given that we have not done that, and Biden, in fact, has said he would never do that under any circumstances, then it simply becomes the hostages are not the top priority. The defeat of Hamas is the top priority for Israel, and the U.S. is perfectly willing to co-sign that. So they are not being prioritized. I think the Israeli officials would like to get them back, ideally, but are not going to make a different calculation in terms of their war against Hamas to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that there have been various points at which, one, there have been temporary ceasefires that have resulted in the exchange of hostages. 110 hostages were released over the holidays during that ceasefire at the end of last year. Hamas has demonstrated a willingness and ability to keep up their end of the bargain when these temporary ceasefires are negotiated. About a week after that, in late February, Israel rejected another ceasefire deal that would have resulted in the release of all of the hostages. And this recurring cycle is going on and on, it seems because there is this complete unwillingness to do anything short of scorched earth from the Netanyahu administration. The longer this goes on, I think this is something we used to debate about. I don't know how debatable it is anymore, that the clear objective here is not destroying Hamas. In fact, the siege that is being laid here is very likely to give rise to generations of militants who are understandably furious that their whole families have been decimated, other universities have been destroyed, that they've been left with absolutely no opportunities and become refugees within what was already a refugee camp for millions of Palestinians.
If Hamas holds on long enough, there may just be no one left.
Right, there might be a genocide, which is what people have been warning about. If you killed 2 million people, that is in fact undisputably a genocide. So the question is whether or not Netanyahu should get away with saying, basically, I think that the hostages are a sunk cost. I shouldn't be prioritizing their safety. I'm going to use them as a political cudgel to demonize Hamas, but not actually being invested in their safety at all, because my ultimate goal is to commit a genocide or to ethnically cleanse Gaza and to do what Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, alluded to in a recent event that we covered here on the show.
Well, in fairness,
just to build up beachfront property in Gaza and turn it into an extension of Israel.
I mean, in fairness, and you can take it or leave it, but their position is that unless they fully defeat Hamas, there will be more October 7th, because Hamas has said that's going to be the case. There will be more violence against Israeli citizens. There will be more prisoners taken, so that they will have to go through this whole experience again and again in the future unless this organization is totally wiped out. So they're prioritizing the prevention of hostages in the future, according to their plan. You can say that that's naive or that's wrong, but that's their thinking of what they're doing.
I don't know. It's hard for me to look at that.
They could agree to, they could allow Hamas to continue to exist and get these hostages back and find themselves in the exact same position because they need to. They cannot coexist. They believe they cannot coexist with this terrorist group on their borders, and they are going to take every effort to eliminate them. At the unfortunate cost of widespread death and destruction in Gaza.
Yeah, I don't know.
And Hamas should take that to heart and give up the game.
I mean, I don't know how you can look at that man in that video. I don't know how you can look at that person who lost a part of his arm and who very clearly needs medical attention and not prioritize getting him home. Like, you can sit there and say, well, he's got to pay the cost because there will be more prisoners down the line, but he has a family and there are real people that everyone claims to care about. Prioritize the hostages. There was all of this fighting about the hostages signs being put up and whether they should be torn down and all of that. Okay, let's prioritize the hostages. Prioritizing the hostages means not saying that until every Palestinian is dead or every building in Palestine is destroyed, that we are not going to.
Hamas is dead.
But they're not. What are they doing?
But they're willing to destroy every building in Gaza until Hamas is defeated.
They're willing to kill 2.3 million Palestinians. And Hamas should take that under
consideration, maybe.
If you don't care that they might be willing to kill 2.3 million Palestinians to end Hamas, might you care that they're willing to kill?
I'm not saying I don't care. I wish Hamas
dozens
cared.
of hostages, Israeli hostages, American hostages, people who are innocents in the mix of all of this because you want to kill Hamas? If that was your family member, would you be willing?
But Briahna, even you would recognize, and I understand the family members' motivations might be different from the security of the state. Like, even you would realize, I mean, there are situations, right, where, so right now Russia is holding that Wall Street Journal reporter prisoner, and if they said, we'll give him back, but I don't know, the U.S. government has to totally dismantle itself or something, we wouldn't say, well, that's
Totally dismantle itself? The October 7th attack was notable because it was unusual. It was a break from the norm. Israel, they had no idea that Palestinians can mount that kind of, Gazans, Hamas, could mount that kind of a threat and actually break through the wall and be successful in that regard. That has never happened. When people say this is the worst thing that's ever happened to Jews since the Holocaust, there's two sides of that, right? It also speaks to how deeply safe Israelis are. Meanwhile, the death toll in Gaza, long before October 7th, was one of the most deadly years, if not the most deadly year for children in Gaza prior to October 7th. So there's a real asymmetry in the way that we're talking about this. And the point is, Israel is safe. Israelis are safe. We invest billions of dollars every year in Israeli safety. So the idea that because it's like saying that because one person got shot by a handgun in the United States of America, we should get rid of all the Second Amendment, right? That's equivalent. Okay, so
those arguments are frequently made, but
right, but not by me and not by you. And we constitutionally protect the Second Amendment against those kind of arguments. So now, basically, the Netanyahu government take is along the lines of there was an attack that resulted in the killing of innocent people. And as a consequence, we're going to kill, it doesn't matter how many innocent people, including our own, imperil the lives of our own hostages. I mean, they did actually shoot 3 of their own hostages at the end of last year who were trying to escape, all because of this greater goal of ending the Second Amendment, of making sure Hamas doesn't exist at all.
That's really not the point I was making.
Do Palestinians have a right to exist? They have to sacrifice their right to exist because of Hamas's actions on October 7th?
Okay, that's not what I was saying, though. What I was saying is, if any enemy or unfriendly government organization has your hostages, there is a limit. Just set this situation aside to what you're going to be willing to do to get those hostages back, and that's not wrong or uncaring to say, well, we're not willing. I mean, this is why the U.S. government has the official policy of never negotiating with terrorists to begin with, because you don't want to go down the. But you have the stated policy of not doing that, so that terrorist or antagonistic organizations like Russia can't take advantage of your humanitarianism or your desire to protect your own people and extort you to make bad diplomatic choices for your own security by taking people hostage.
Well, let me ask you this. Look, April 17th was Palestinian Prisoners' Day, which is dedicated to the thousands of Palestinian prisoners in Israel. And that week, Israel released 150 of those thousands of Palestinian prisoners that are detained in Israel, many of which are actual children. So the question becomes, if you believe that a group of people has the right to attack and do violence indefinitely as long as their people are being kept imprisoned, isn't that the same exact rationale that you could use to say that Hamas has a right to keep fighting Israel and keep attacking Israel until their prisoners are returned? Well, that's the logic that Netanyahu is using as it's sieging Gaza, saying it's going to do this, it won't stop, and it certainly won't stop, even if you're looking at a video of a hostage, an American Israeli hostage with one arm missing, who desperately needs medical attention, but who can't get it because they won't negotiate a ceasefire.
I mean, all right, we gotta leave it there. We're hearing. Tomorrow on Rising, we will hand off the baton to the Fridays team, Amber and Jessica. You won't want to miss that.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. For those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, they're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
See you later.
Take care.